Hello, everybody. We've got another wonderful author here with us to present her chapter and tell us a little bit more about her as well. And so Suzanne Jabour is our guest today. Suzanne, you want to tell us a bit more about who you are, what you're up to, where you're at in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and recording these interviews for us. I am Suzanne Jabour. I'm in Vancouver, so I'm another BC Canadian person. I'm a grief educator. And so, what I do is I talk to people about grief and how it really works, and how by shifting our response and feeling less fear and a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more at this point comfortable with being uncomfortable, we can really transform the experience that grievers have and that we have as people trying to support them. So that is what I am all about.
Perfect. And I love what you're doing because I mean, there is so much need for that. I mean, as clearly you're well aware, in
Hmm.
our culture, we just don't talk about grief. We don't let people have that space to really deal with grief. And if anything, we tend to leave people alone in their grief,
Yeah.
which is probably one of the worst things to do. So I'm so grateful that you are getting out there and educating employers and educating groups of people and just, like you said, getting us more comfortable with the whole idea of grief is part of life. And there's a
Yeah.
better way to approach it and handle it and deal with it and support the people who are grieving. And I love how you're doing that. And I'm so excited that you're part of this book. So Women Transforming Leadership in Business and Community. It'll be coming out and we'll be hitting our international bestseller, and it's so exciting. And can you tell us the title of your chapter and a bit about it?
Yeah. My chapter is called Transforming Our Response to Grief, the Role of Women Leaders. And what I really set out to do in the chapter was, cram everything I know into one chapter. So it is really jam packed. I really wanted to provide some really basic grief information, grief education, sort of grief 101, if you will. So it's full of information about how grief really works, because one of the, painful and harmful side effects of us having this taboo around grief in our culture is that we don't talk about it, as you said. And so we're not learning from each other what actually is totally normal and what are the normal things we should expect to happen. So I cover off a whole bunch of those, the normal symptoms, the actual timeline, because it's not, we're not done and dusted once the memorial event has happened. In fact, we're just barely started. And it's really a months and years long timeline as opposed to a days and weeks timeline, which is kind of what we've been led to believe. So set out all of that information. And then I talk about really what we can do as leaders, and particularly as women leaders, to transform the spaces that we're leaders in. So whether you're a leader in, if you're a CEO of an organization, or you're a leader in a family, a leader in a community, anywhere you have a leadership role, whether it's official or de facto, or just how you carry yourself in the world, there is a role for us to play to change the harm that we're doing. Because right now, unfortunately, what we're doing is creating harm. As you said, we're creating isolation when what we're really trying to do is connect with the person. But because we don't know how to do that, we end up causing harm. And we can fix all of that. And it really just starts with having those conversations, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and acknowledging that we just, as a collective, are really crap at grief. We're just not good at it. And that's something we've inherited. That's something that's part of our sort of societal structure because we have the taboo and the silence. So, really, the intention of the chapter is to provide a bunch of information, some ideas and suggestions, and really give you a way as a leader to step into this conversation, to be able to open it up in spaces and create a new normal where talking about our losses and how they impact us is just part of what we do.
I love that. And I guess we should let people know that we're also working on another book that is specifically focused on grief. And we're bringing
Mhm.
together a group of people to really share their experience and their expertise on grief. And one of the things I always love to bring into that conversation too, that the grief isn't just about losing a person,
No.
that there's losing a pet, losing a job, going through a divorce, like really anything in our life that is a loss can
Mhm.
create the grieving process. And I think just really bringing that to light as well, that it's not only when someone has lost someone they love, but it's also all these other things that they also need that support. They need the understanding. They need the people around them to be there for them and not ignore the situation. So I love.
Yeah. And I think what's so powerful about that understanding is when we know that, then we can see all the amazing places we can practice these new skills and understandings that we all need to practice, right? Starting with someone like me who was a grieving mom grieving out loud, I am not a good first assignment. Like I know I was terrifying to people, and I'm okay with that because I had to do what I had to do to survive. But that really meant that I was not, if you didn't have some ability to have this awkward conversation, I was not a place you were going to start. But when we understand that change brings loss, loss brings grief, we can start to see the smaller ruptures in our life, the smaller griefs that aren't as, life upending, right? Like the loss of a loved one can be. Then we also have places where we can practice new skills, where we can try out saying something different that we've never said before and not feel like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a catastrophic mess if it goes wrong, right? Because if we're talking about losses that are ones we know we will move on from, we know, like we understand that we will, as much as it's devastating to lose a job, we understand that there's likely another one, right? As much as it's devastating to lose a relationship, there's the opportunity there might be another one if you choose that, right? So those kinds of losses, and even down to when we talk about leadership and business, what if we started in the business space talking about the losses that are happening there?
Right.
So, not just maybe when you lose a patient or a client or a colleague. What about when a product launch doesn't go the way you want, or
Yeah,
when
good
you
point.
restructure? Or I had a woman in a workshop who realized in the one of the exercises that we did that she was still grieving that her office had moved
Oh,
because she had worked in the old workspace for 20 years and really, built her career in that space, in that physical building. And she still drove by it every day on the way to the new one. So even though it's a situation where there was all that excitement and they were moving into a way better space, for her, there was a real loss of that space where she had started out there and she built her career. And now she had to drive by it and see like someone else's logo on the building was just so disorienting. So you can see like that's a place I might feel comfortable practicing and trying to say something different and trying to just be quiet and not try and fix it, right? Because it doesn't, she's already moved on from that loss. She's already has a new place to work. Like the thing that was lost has already been replaced, and there's still grief from that, even though it was something that was a change for the better. So there really is so much rich conversation we could be having, but we don't understand it and we're terrified of it, and so we're not having those conversations. So
yeah.
this is
And I
all
think
to
that
disrupt all of that.
that fear of saying or doing the wrong thing,
Yeah,
I think, is what stops people from doing anything
yeah,
in
and that's
most
harmful
cases.
as well. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I love that. And it's kind of going back to the theme of the book. What is your perspective on how women are transforming leadership in business and community and family, like you say?
Yeah, I think what I see happening now is a really exciting kind of return to owning that as women, we actually carry something unique that's really valuable in leadership. That we have a different perspective on the world, we have a different lived experience. And, for women of our generation, we spent a lot of it in that masculine framework because that's the only one that was acceptable. And what I'm really excited about the shift that I'm seeing now is there's more of an understanding and a beginning of a shift to seeing that all of these different frameworks have value. And the more different ones we have in a room, the more robust we are as an organization, the more creative, the more successful, the more resilient, all the things. Every single study says the more diversity you have in the room, the better off you are. There's nothing that contradicts that. So that's part of what I think is really exciting and interesting, especially for women, is that we can bring all of those more feminine qualities and capacities that either we've been in denial of or feel like have been kind of taken advantage of to make us like the organizer and the coffee getter and the person who like arranges the food, like and plans the socials, right? Like all that kind of yucky stuff that we had to do as women back in the day and still have to. But there is more and more of a recognition that our innate quality just as a woman in the room brings a different perspective that's of value. And I think it's a time that we need to leverage that for all that we can use it to gain.
No, I love that, and the work that you're doing around grief fits into that new model so
Hmm.
perfectly. It's not about keeping people in little boxes and just do your work and
No.
shut up. It's about understand that individual and how can we support them to be, a more effective and efficient member of a business or a community or a family. So
Yeah.
yes, the work that you're doing is a perfect example of how things are shifting that way. And no, I've just loved having this chat, and I'm so excited to have you in this book as well as in our upcoming grief book. And so if people wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for people to do that?
Best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm Suzanne Jabour, so I'm the only one. It's easy to find me. And you can go to my website, which is also suzannejabour.com, and everything I'm up to will be there.
Perfect, perfect. That sounds easy enough. And was there any
Mhm.
kind of last minute things you want the audience to know about that you're up to in the next little while?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on. I have grief cafes for grievers. So that's a free offering that happens twice a month through Meetup. So you can also find me on Meetup and join that group if you're someone who needs those safe spaces to have just a conversation about grief. I'm doing right now, I'm in the midst of a writing program. I'm doing a collaboration with a partner who is she's a writer and a writing coach. And so she provides the writing prompts and I provide the grief education. And we have these amazing conversations. So that's a 6 week program that we'll be running on an ongoing basis. So there'll be another entry in late January. And what else is happening? So I have a three-pronged approach. So if you need support as a griever, grief cafes, one-on-one coaching, conscious and curious grieving. If you're a leader who wants to know more, grief informed leadership is a project that I'm working on that will be launching in the new year. So there'll be a 4 to 6 week, I haven't quite figured out, probably 4 week course where you can come together with a bunch of other leaders that want to be at the forefront of this issue and really step up in their organizations. So that's grief informed leadership. And then grief resilient workplaces. If you want to transform the organization at a system level, that's what that is for. So I come into your organization and we break it all down and we build it back up. And you have this resilient, supportive place for grievers when they come back to work, when loss happens in the workplace, and lots of open conversation happening. So, yeah, come
Wow,
join me.
perfect, perfect. And don't forget, you're working on a TED Talk.
Yeah,
We
hopefully
got our
we'll
fingers
be,
crossed.
yes, that announcement will come out. That list will be posted in mid-October. So hopefully I will have a very exciting announcement about a TEDx talk then.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this nice little interview. It's always great to learn more about you and what you're up to. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. We'll chat again soon, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.